Hello and welcome to the Adaptivist Expert Hour, and the first in a special series of live events called Ignite Your Transformation. Thanks for joining us at this live event today. I'm Karen Ray, Adaptivist Solutions Marketing Manager, and your host for this live event. This Expert Hour series is all about what we predict is in store for businesses in 2025. Adaptivist has enterprise consultants globally, and we deliver bespoke, end-to-end solutions to leading brands and Fortune 500 businesses. The first Expert Hour in this series focuses on Agile 2025 predictions. Hi guys, we have with us today Phil Highcoop, Head of our Agile practice from the US, and Shar and Enterprise Agile Coach and Consultant from South Africa. Let's dive into those predictions for Agile in 2025 with our experts. Okay, Phil, to set the stage for today's live session, this one's for you. What is Agile transformation?
So an Agile transformation is really the changing of an organization's processes and ways of working. And not to be too vague about it, but I guess it can be as big or as little as needed. Most of it depends on your starting point and what you're trying to achieve. So it can be anything from coaching individual teams to be more customer focused and understanding and reactive, all the way towards changing how you do business, how you define your value streams and map those accordingly. So it can be as big and can be as small as an organization needs it to be. We try and make it as small as possible while being as impactful as possible, right? So you don't want to do disruption for the sake of disruption.
Thank you. And for everyone watching, please feel free to drop your thoughts or questions in the comments section. Shar, if you're ready, what would you say is the biggest challenge that enterprises are going to face when it comes to Agile transformation initiatives in 2025? Is there one thing that sticks out to you as a kind of people are going to be struggling with this or having to overcome this particular issue?
Hi, Karen. Lovely to see you again, always. I love this topic because I think challenges and business is one of those sweet spots that we love to explore. It's our playground. And you really challenged me to pick just one thing. It's going to be really hard. So let's compromise. Let me do three. But bear in mind, I'm talking about from what we've seen trending, but every organization, we're constantly seeing new challenges arise as organizations are, evolving, especially in this day and age. So much is changing so rapidly. But I think if we have to really pick the top three, one of the big things is ROI matters. So, the trend you'll never get rid of is that money has always mattered. And I think more so now. So more so than ever, any initiative needs to have a clear reason why it exists and a clear reason of how it's going to actually, give that return on investment that so many people actually now looking for more intentionally. I think the other thing that you often get is kind of like everyone's trying to throw AI into everything. And whilst I'm a big fan of AI, and I believe it definitely has a space in the business and productivity space, I think it's important to always keep the focus on strengths. So get the best out of AI and by focusing on its strength, which it's really good at summarizing and collating and assimilating information and, hypothesizing. It's got really good legs in those things. It can do it better than any of us can. But on the other side, human beings still have their strength in that whole narrative, which is when you're coming to understand a really complex context like human system dynamics, it's important that you make sure that you focus on the human side of that. AI will not and cannot really replace that and help you understand the complexity. So feedback from a human basic perspective is pretty important. And I think the last one is the challenge is to move beyond some of the buzzwords we've been playing around with for quite a long time in business. So things like quicker time to market, efficiency, all of those are really great as concepts. But what do they do for your business goals? Like, how do they align to your business goals? So I think that's a really big challenge for business to focus on less on a trend or on a buzzword, but more on what does it mean for my business?
Thank you, Shar. Phil, you're up. So thinking more about AI, it's clearly taken root. The use of AI tools, being able to use them effectively, could be a point of difference for businesses and helping them to set them apart from the competition. How do you see AI impacting the Agile world in 2025?
I think there's a number of ways it can do that. So there's probably three, not to borrow Shar, but there's three main ways. I think the one is um, it's going to impact the ways everybody works, right? So it's going to impact how people assimilate data, gather it, process it, but also the expectations for everybody is going to be you need to start learning how to use and incorporate AI into your day to day. And so there's a tweaking to your ways of working that's probably going to be necessary. And so everybody's just going to have to kind of relearn their job to a degree in terms of how to include AI. I think a lot of this is really exciting, to be honest with you. It means information is going to be much faster and more accessible. And the decision making that humans are very good at, that discretionary element, is going to be even more important. The second thing, though, that most people kind of the flip side of that coin is the governance angle to it, right? So AI is not infallible. And so people, and especially organizations that have a lower risk tolerance, they need to put systems in place to make sure that they can actually keep any potential, I don't want to say downside, but certain unexpected consequences kind of to a minimal impact type of scenario. And I think to what Shar alluded to as well, there's also going to be a good bit of how does this change the way you operate. We've already started to see companies try to replace their customer support agents, like the human beings, with chatbots and things like that in the past. I think we'll see that trend kind of come back a little bit more. I don't think this is something that people should go 100% in. So I think there's always going to be a need for a way to contact a human, mostly because we can't map everything. And sometimes you need an actual decision. So you need that discretionary ability. But you're definitely going to see the increase in efficiency and the corresponding expectations that are going to change based on this. And we're just trying to figure out, along with everybody, through experimentation and conversations and getting our hands dirty, frankly, what that looks like. Like, what is the potential? What are areas that we need to be mindful of? What are potential guardrails we need to put in place, whether it's on the behavioral side or on the data side? So, like, what data shouldn't be accessible? And also just like what level of comfort do we have to exposing this to our business customers? Because it's one thing to use the tool experimentally internally, where you have someone who can always manage that. It's a whole another ball of wax if you try and expose that externally and saying, you know what, this AI is going to speak on our behalf, because that just opens up all kinds of potential problems. So that's probably where a lot of conversations need to go.
Thank you, Phil. So would you say that there's a risk that organizations, while adopting AI, might stifle the experimentation and innovation that Agile frameworks enable? For example, instead of having collaborative conversations and thinking outside of the box, they just ask for AI for an answer. Do you think that's happening?
I think no, there's a risk of that. I think there's always going to be a risk of some of that happening. But as a general rule, I think a lot of people are being agile without being deliberately calling it agile with this AI adoption. So there's a market trend. There's a demand for it. The customers are asking and expecting that, and a lot of companies are trying to incorporate that. So meeting that demand by adopting the capabilities of AI into their business. And so what you're seeing actually is a lot of organizations having that feedback loop and adaptability and taking that into their way of working. There is definitely a risk of people trying to offshore or outsource a lot of decisions and processes to AI that probably isn't quite ready for that. I think that while there's still a lot of uncertainty here, being able to use tools and frameworks that Agile has brought into the fold, and not just Agile, right? There's a lot of other ways that we can have collaboration and effective discussion. There's a lot of space for organizations to kind of start to learn by doing, and improving their internal decision making, collaboration, customer centricity, and outcome focus. That we don't have to call it Agile to achieve the benefits of it. So I try and see the glass half full when it comes to those things. I see a lot of ways and opportunities. This is going to be very beneficial for individuals, for customers, for companies themselves. So I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible. There's always going to be a risk, and I think that it's important to call those out. But by and large, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think there's a lot of reason to be excited for it.
Thank you, Phil. And audience, those that are watching, this is a live event, so please pop your questions and opinions in the comment section, and we'll get to those as well live. Shar, back to you. AI has dominated conversations in recent years. Looking ahead, now we are in 2025. Are there any other emerging trends, technological or other ways of working, that businesses, particularly agile ones, should start preparing for now?
I think that's a great question. So I think AI will continue to dominate for 2025, but something that we're really excited to see and starting to work with is agile and business agility moving beyond traditional teams like your IT and technical teams. So we're seeing a lot more engagement from teams like business teams and finance teams, with businesses understanding that the real key to unlocking it is getting these different components of the business all working towards the same business agility goals. So that's a really exciting area that's coming into play. So seeing non-traditional teams look at agile also as an effective way of working, where traditionally there was a lot of resistance and it just felt like it was not worth the hassle. We're now seeing innovation is needed even in finance. Even if those things that we think are rigid and as old as time, you need them in every area of your business. I think the other exciting bit is to hybrid or not to hybrid. I think that's the question that's been plaguing most organizations since around 2021, 2022. A lot of organizations across the world still very much opting for fully remote, and then you get everything from fully remote to fully on site and everything in between. An interesting thing that's coming out of that is also asynchronous working. So now you've got people working in different sort of environments, and now you've got them working in different sort of regions and different time zones. So no longer do we want those to be barriers to us. So asynchronous working is really coming up at how do we do this? What are the right tools and techniques and frameworks that can help us work asynchronously and still effectively? Because that was a very novel concept not that long ago. So I think that's going to be a really interesting trend to see how we do this better. And I think the last thing that we've kind of been alluding to, and I think is going to be a common theme of what we speak about today, is it's really the year of pragmatism. It's like, really, how can we make these agile frameworks work for the business? So how do we tailor what was previously a recipe or almost like a silver bullet? How do we take away those kind of feelings and perceptions of agile away from that and kind of really make it a pragmatic framework that is tailored to a business needs? I think that's going to be really exciting to see how that unfolds.
Thank you, Shar. We have actually had a question in from Tom. I'm going to read the question. You guys can choose who wants to go for it. We often talk about AI adoption in terms of creativity or productivity, which it certainly can unlock. However, how do we use AI in a way that ensures that we don't end up isolating ourselves from our team and losing that human connection that makes us successful?
That's a really good question, Tom. I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll let Shar kind of correct me or fill in the blanks. I think there's a lot of resonance to your question to a lot of the conversations we have around remote work, right? So a lot of people talk about the potential benefits in productivity measures, but often that's in isolation. So with the individual, there's two things that I think would be really important when it comes to thinking about that and making sure we don't lose the collaboration element to it and the human connection, as you mentioned. The first is, I think that in most organizations, no one makes the decision in isolation, and that should remain the way. So one of the principles in many agile frameworks and ways of working is around collaboration and making sure that you have all the other stakeholders in the room. And I think that that's something that will actually just become just as vital here. So as people become more productive and more capable of doing things, it becomes even more imperative that we don't make these decisions without the informed consent or the contributions from other people. So going fast doesn't mean we have to go alone. And I think the other part that's really important here is that a lot of the stuff that comes out of AI at the moment is very much this is the starting point of a discussion, frankly. Like, if you think of it that way, AI is really good at kickstarting a lot of work because you no longer have to start from a blank page. You can ask it a question, it will give you all kinds of suggestions, and you shouldn't take that as gospel. You should take that as a starting point. And what we've seen a lot is that organizations thrive very well when they have conversations around that. And it's easier to have a conversation around, even if it's a straw man argument that comes out of this tool, than to say, all right, let's start together and think of something from scratch, right? There's a lot less reinventing the wheel, but this only still works to achieve the best outcome by stress testing it through collaboration and stress testing it by having conversations with the different stakeholders, because you can even phrase the question in such a way that you're going to get a specific type of reply, and you can have a certain stakeholder that will come in and say, that's all well and good from an engineering perspective, but that doesn't cover my finance concerns, and that doesn't cover my market concerns. Therefore, we need to, you can think about it as literalism and change the prompt, or you can just say, hey, we need to expand this concern by having a broader conversation. So I think that those things both are required to get the most out of AI, and they also they lean into that strength because collaboration and that connection is really key to it.
Oh, hi, Shar.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great response, Phil. I think the only thing I would add on top of that, Tom, is this is the question even before AI. It's something around how do we get team dynamics and organizational dynamics to work, because with every new introduction of every new technology, there's a reliance more and more on technology and less on people and having to be together in the same place and same time to kind of do things, which is all in the right space. I think the answer that I give for anything that has to do with human dynamics is always the same. It's intentionality. If you're intentional in how you use what you're using with the understanding of what it is that you're trying to get out of it, then I think you're on the right path. And it's really important to understand that none of these technologies, whether it's AI today and whatever it's going to be tomorrow, they're not there. Resisting them doesn't actually hold your team closer. It actually just fragments the whole experience, because then you've got people really excited about the new technology and people resisting for good reasons, wanting to keep the team more human and keep them more centered on people, but not really being able to embrace what's new and helpful. So I think a lot of it is being intentional and not using resistance as an excuse to not explore these things, but use experimentation. So experiment, explore. Use those kind of reasonings and hypotheses to figure out what does this mean for us as a team and how do we go forward.
Thank you, Shar. Okay, talking about technology, Phil. Hiya. So something like Focus, which is Atlassian's new enterprise strategy and planning offering, does it help bring those three pillars together? And how do you see Adaptivists' Agile services complementing people who are looking to implement Focus? Just some thoughts on that looking ahead.
So I think the three pillars that we talked about, right? So business, finance, and product development or engineering. I think it does. So as Shar mentioned, one of the things that's really important is to make sure that we're all working together and that we have the same outcome in mind, those business goals. Focus is designed to help with that, right? So whether you're using OKRs or some other goal measuring framework, it makes a lot of that more explicit. You already have some of that in either the Atlassian Marketplace or in Jira Align and other tools. This probably integrates it more tightly and allows you to have those conversations around the specific goal that you're trying to achieve, whether it's with the entire value stream or just the team that you're working on. And the other thing that I think is really important, this is where we see a lot of questions come up with the services that we offer, is that it brings certain questions that we run into a lot, like certain common patterns, to the forefront sooner. One of those is, I don't want to call it bad strategy, maybe incomplete or less clear strategy than it could be. This is a very common upstream problem to a lot of agile execution questions. So we see that those kinds of questions would come up earlier and allow us to bring in those business stakeholders into the conversation earlier. And then we can use that to have much more clarity. And what we see generally, and this is where a lot of our coaching and services kind of comes in, is that the tighter that strategy, the tighter those definitions and goals are and objectives, the better everybody can make decisions autonomously within their context. And that's really where both agile execution, but making sure that the execution is tied to the strategic imperatives of the organization really thrives, is to make sure that people can do that and they understand what the leadership intent is. And I think that that's where Focus will really help We obviously have experience doing all that. We've done it with other tools. I think it will just accelerate using that tool because it brings it into the Atlassian estate. So that's the quick thoughts, I guess.
Thank you, Phil. Shar, this one's for you. As Phil mentioned, strategy, where teams and business sides considerations, then there's the tech teams and even the finance teams. Traditionally, finance hasn't really worked in agile ways. They often budget rigidly, kind of years in advance, even sometimes. How do you see having access to data and these feedback loops impacting finance teams? Oh, Shar, you're just on mute. Sorry.
I apologize. Yeah, so
Beauty of
has
life.
has to happen at least once. I have to say it's really exciting. I think it's a great movement, and it's a great milestone for organizations that are getting that right. We're seeing there's a lot of frameworks now also that are emerging that are helping agile type this. Sorry, I disappeared there for a second. So I think what we're really seeing is these feedback loops are allowing finance teams to work with things like lean budgeting, and allowing them to also understand how this can make sense for them. And being part of that innovation, it's also really exciting for teams in the finance space to feel like they're part of the creative process and not just the gatekeepers. And a real intentional step forward is the CFO. So the characters and the personas of the CFOs that are taking these positions are emerging as a whole new breed. A CFO understands the delicate balance between innovation, business, and good financial management, and is really emphasizing all of those factors and not just on the financial management side. So we're seeing some new players and personas emerge, and as well as some frameworks that help finance teams lean a little bit more into agile to see the benefit of what financial planning could look like in a more agile way.
Thank you, Shar. Thank you. So we're going to go to Phil again, changing tack slightly to hybrid work. And whether or not hybrid work, that's the question, to hybrid work or not. We've obviously seen companies being pulled in both directions when it comes to remote and office-based work. What do you think we can expect in 2025 when it comes to the establishment of a new normal? And how do you predict agile teams will be affected as a result? Will agile frameworks and working practices need to adapt?
I think it'll persist. So the RTO discussion is probably not going away. What we are going to probably see is companies being a lot more intentional about it. I've seen different conversations around it being potentially a generational thing. It might be also a real estate consideration. I think that's maybe too simplistic an answer. I think there's definitely value in having people in the same space. There's benefits to getting on site, even if you're working remotely, that you just don't get from Zoom. At the same time, I think there's also benefits to working remotely that you can't get by forcing people to get together, right? You have access to a broader talent pool, you have a broader access to different cultures and ideas. So what I think we are going to see is definitely a more intentionality to it. I think it's not going away, and therefore a lot of the frameworks will have to take that in mind. I think a good example for that would be Scaled Agile Framework used to have the big room planning, the PI planning. It had to be on site. That was kind of the initial intent. Most companies very quickly went to well, we can do it remotely as well. Here's how we do it. And they practice and they try different ways to do it. So I think that's something that you're going to see a lot, where they will incorporate that as lessons are learned, which is kind of the Agile approach. People are going to try things, and some things will work, some things won't. I know a couple companies that have tried the remote PI planning and didn't get the benefits they wanted out of it, didn't get that sense of alignment. Certain conversations just get hard over Zoom, and there's a lot of benefit to bringing that together. But with more tools, like Loom being a good example, like you can move to different ways. So I think people are going to be very deliberate about what their mechanisms are. And I think what you're going to see is that people will lean into those benefits to kind of compensate for the potential downsides of one or the other. And a lot of companies, especially the remote ones, they do have on-site get-togethers. So you'll find ways to dip into the benefits of both, is going to be my guess.
Thank you, Phil. Debbie has a question. So how can I help my team become more agile? And is it possible to do that with remote working, as we're on the topic?
Yeah, I think Agile and remote working are certainly not mutually exclusive by any means. If anything, they may not be necessarily related, frankly. So becoming more agile, I guess a lot of that depends on what that means. Different people mean different things when they talk about becoming more agile. It can be more customer centric. It could be more having the same way of working, so aligned to a specific process so that there's more predictability and an understanding. The shortest answer, I guess, would be to talk to an agile coach potentially. We have some, but we're far from the only ones. And I think the other part, this is where I echo Shar's intentionality is really important, right? So be specific, be as clear as you can be around what is it you mean by I want to be more agile. I find organizational agility and team agility is impossible to measure, and it's also not the right goal in most cases, right? Do you want to increase communication? Do you want to increase understanding? Do you want to have better conversations so you have the ability to disagree within the organization without it becoming personal? There's a lot of ways to be more agile, and my challenge to Debbie would be to clarify that a little bit, and then we can dive into that specifically, because being more agile, I don't know what that means, to be honest with you, even given my title, but we have different elements of agility that we can help you be more of, and I think that that's where a lot of the conversation starts.
Thank you. We're talking about sort of continuous learning and learning to, new ways of doing things. So with learning and development, agile practice continue to be the top priority for leaders. Will it continue to be a top priority to keep up with the rapid pace of change? Or is there a growing sense of agile apathy where leaders feel like they already know everything they need to know and don't see the need for ongoing learning and development, which I hope is not the case?
I think, well, you'll see probably a good bit of that. I think that they're going to lose out to the teams that are more agile. While I'm not, again, I don't want to be more agile for the sake of being more agile. I don't even know what that means. I do think that organizations that continuously try to improve their processes, whether it's customer centricity or making sure they deliver much more value in kind of that lean sense of value, right? The minimal waste. Those are the ones that are generally going to be the ones that come out on top. It's not a guarantee, right? There's a lot more to it, but what we have seen though is a little bit of pushback to a lot of the agile. I don't want to call it agile apathy necessarily, but you're definitely seeing a lot of people who've gone through an agile transformation that didn't work, and we've seen that in a lot of different ways, right? Either inexperienced leadership or lack of commitment or not bringing everybody in there. So that's where we have to make sure that we manage expectations and the change correctly so that people understand that this is a process and we will be getting better, but also intentionality again, right? Like, what is it we're trying to achieve? And so there's that pushback from people who've been through a bad experience. And they'll say it's agile they don't like, but it's bad agile, and nobody wants bad agile, right? I think that's where it's important that we as an organization also try and keep most of our agile experts as people who've done the job. So it's not just people who've gone through a course and learned a little bit and they're very smart and have an MBA type of consulting. It's people who had that job, they've done through it, they've been that nitty gritty, they've gone through the scarring and the ditch digging and all the hard work, and they understand all of that, and they can guide you through that because that's where all the hard work is. So you'll see that, but continuous learning, I think that's imperative. Like, you're going to get left behind. It's only getting faster. Organizations will sometimes want agile, just don't call it agile. We see that a lot. Frameworks like TBM are great because they build upon that with a heavy focus on the business and the financial side of it, but they still embrace agility, business agility, the benefits of all that. So we don't have to call it agile, right? We're not championing being more agile for the sake of agile. There's no scorecard for that. It's always going to be tied to business outcomes. And I think that as long as we can do that, you will be able to circumvent any agile fatigue, agile apathy, any don't call it agile concerns, because at the end of the day, it's always going to be around, hey, what's the outcome we're trying to deliver here? Great. Here are the tools that we're going to use to get you there.
Thank you, Phil. And don't forget, to everyone watching live, please do put your comments in. Is there agile apathy? Is this something that you have experienced within your organization? Don't forget to pop a comment on, because our experts are live and they can answer your questions live. So back to Shar. If you had to sum up where Agile is heading in 2025, where would that be? A specific word? Have you got maybe a sentence or perhaps a phrase? What's your go-to message for customers or those looking to have internal discussions about Agile transformation or transformation in general?
Another challenge, use less words. Always a good one. If I had to pick two words, I would say, and Phil, I think Phil hit the nail on the head. Agile as a whole has gotten a bad rep in the last couple of years, so we want to stick away from that word. But agility is still a very, very, very important word for business. It still means what it's supposed to mean. It still means flexibility. It still means adaptation. It still means. So I would say, if I had to put two words together that would make sense for 2025, I would say pragmatic agility. So make agility, that flexibility, that space of adaptability, make it resonate with what it means for your business. Find out first what works for your business, and then adopt the frameworks, which was previously like a cookie cutter, kind of follow this recipe to the letter. Adopt the frameworks to what you need, because the principles and the intention behind all of these same frameworks are pretty much the same. Get teams to work better, listen to your customers more. So, we've tried to kind of take those into our businesses and organizations without really understanding what does that mean for us. So let's flip the script on this whole thing and do pragmatic agility. And I think, again, Phil alluded to it already, you can only really do that with people who have known the game for more than just the certification and more than just the training. So if you get in the right people into your space and they understand the game, pragmatic agility can really work for you. So find out first what it means to your business, what works for you, what doesn't, what is it that you're trying to drive, and then get the best of the frameworks into your space with someone who knows how to do it. I had the best agile coach I've ever met in my life, and a great mentor to me always said, don't break what you don't understand. So it's really important that you understand what it means to break a certain framework or to go against it. That therefore guidance is needed. But once you do understand that, then by all means, do what works. And I think pragmatic agility is something we've been striving for a long time. I think it's something that businesses know they need, but they don't know how to get to. And that is a delicate balance. It is not an easy thing to achieve. But if you can get the right people on your team, understand your business in that way, business first, what is it that we want? What is it that we want this framework to do for us? It's really, really funny. The number of times that I step into a client who understands their problem statements really well, and then when I ask, what will Agile do for you? What is this framework, whether it's Safe or Scrum or whatever, there's a lot of and it's like, isn't it supposed to do what it's supposed to do? Like if I buy a car, isn't it supposed to drive? And it really doesn't really work that way. So I would think it's a great time now that we've been playing in this agile world for a long time. We understand what it can do. We understand what it can't do. It's a great time for businesses to pick up the conversation about agility, but in a more pragmatic way into what works for the business.
Okay, thank you, Shar. Great answer. We have had another question come through, if you're okay to take this one. In your opinion, do a lot of companies tend to focus on only quick results and kind of overlook the crucial journey of transformation that change demands?
Oh, I love that. I wish you'd put your name on it, because I really want to give you a shout out. That is a great question. And it is, and it sounds like from experience, because I think too many organizations and people have felt that experience, which is, I think it's really tragic. It really is in the way that we want transformation of any kind, agile or business or of any kind, to be felt in that way, where you're just rushing to get the results. We know how important it is for inclusion and in all its forms to be a part of the process. And so often that's the part that gets missed out. We forget in our rush to get to the end goal of the bullet, or where we think this is all the problems is all going to solve. We forget to include the people in the journey. And that's really the heart of transformation, inclusion. I often like to think of transformation not like from an A to B, but it's almost like a journey. As you get into, if you're on a you use an ocean liner or a boat, you get into the boat and you kind of know the horizon you're going towards, but you don't know what's in between. And so it's really important that throughout that you're feeling and you're conscious and that you're very fully aware of the environment that you're in and the people that you have around you and how they're coping and what's happening with them, and all of the factors that are affecting this little boat of yours, because it's not in isolation. Your change, your transformation is not in isolation. It's happening not just within the environment of the business, but also in your regional environment, in cultural environment, environmental environment, global. There's a ton of stuff that's always in and around any big transformation. And being conscious and conscious leadership is a topic for another day. But I'm a big fan of that conscious leadership. It's really important to bring that into the space and understand that the gift of transformation is not at the end. It's in everything. Yeah.
Phil, have you got anything you would like to add in addition?
I do, yeah. I think that Shar kind of alluded to it in the end, that last sentence, that there's a lot of, there's the quick win group and there's the people that think it's going to take years before you see any results. And I think that's, those are two extremes where the truth actually lies in the middle. As Charlotte mentioned, like there's a continuous delivery of improvement and value that needs to happen. And in organizational change that we see, there are often quick wins, and it's important to call those out because they kind of feed that transformational energy that you need, especially for the periods where you don't have as many potential wins or that are visible. But I think it's really important to make sure that people understand that any organizational change, transformation, whether it's agility or move to the cloud or any kind of other change, that there's definitely an expectation that you are continuously delivering and proving that this is a journey that you want to be on. And I think that's how it should be done. So you have quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, they always exist. They're necessary, they sustain that. But there's also the fact that you are building to something greater, right? So there's a long-term sustainable effort that you need to get to. And it's, you have to balance those things out. But if you're only focused on the quick win, then you're going to forgo all the benefits of the last bit. But at the same time, I think it's worth making sure that you get that energy that charges the team, because they're the ones doing all the hard work and they deserve kind of the benefits as well. Thank
you, Phil. Another one for you, I'm afraid. So you're still in the hot seat on this one.
Bring it.
Is there something that we've not really touched on yet that you feel is going to be a talking point, or something that you would maybe have you got a wild prediction that we perhaps not mentioned yet? Now's your chance.
I think so. We've talked a little bit about AI, and as much as I'm sure everybody already has rolled their eyes when I said, "Oh, there's more AI coming," I think we've talked about AI mostly in the form of generative AI, so large language models and those tools. A lot of organizations are moving towards an agent-based offering. So you see this with Rovo from Atlassian, watsonx has that with IBM, Amazon Q. There's a lot to kind of explore there. And if you extrapolate that a little bit further, because again, the pace is quite fast, I think one of the conversations that we need to start talking about as an Agile community and as a ways of working is around Agile agents and virtual teammates and things like that. And that takes elements that we've already talked about earlier and that just brings them to the fore, right? So you have things like asynchronous working. You have the ability to have agents that are online all the time. They don't sleep, they don't take coffee breaks, they don't need to go to the bathroom, right? They can process things much faster, and that will change the way you work. But you also have expertise at your fingertips. I've seen a couple examples of GPTs that you can build with ChatGPT for Lenny's got one for product management. There's other ones from agility. You have an expert at your fingertips. And so you have the ability to actually punch above your weight a little bit as an organization or as a team. And so learning how to use that effectively with the guardrails in place can be really, really impactful. And so stringing together potential agents and things like that, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. But you have to do it the right way, because I don't think we're heading to Skynet or anything in that way. But there's just the potential for the worst case scenario. I think a lot of organizations fear is if you put a chatbot out there that gives everybody a refund that asks for it, then that's a great way to go broke. But you have to set some guardrails, but there's so much potential here. And especially the virtual teammate angle, I think that's the direction we're going in. That gets very exciting because suddenly scarce resources and scarce talent suddenly becomes accessible to everybody. Every team can have an engineer, a designer, a product manager, an analyst. So you could have access to the things that your team has had to do without previously for a fraction of the cost of an FTE. This is incredible, and it'll allow a lot of small organizations also to deliver amazing results and products and value. So I think there's a lot of excitement there, and finding what that means from a ways of working and how to really include that without, as we mentioned in the comment earlier, losing our sense of self, our identity, becoming kind of let's just offshore all this to the robots. Like, I don't think that's the direction we're going in, but we have to make sure that we keep that in mind.
Thank you, Phil. So one more for you, because we're on the topic of the AI agents right now. So how successful and effective are AI agents once they're set up, kind of compared to the, dare I say it, slower human approach?
Well, they're definitely faster. So we got to give them that. I think that what's interesting is they're really good at certain tasks and very bad at certain other tasks. And it's been an interesting experience going through, obviously, other engineering leaders and product leaders and seeing how they've experienced it and what the outcomes of those results are, or those experiments, sorry. We've seen a lot of them do kind of mid-level engineering, software engineering in particular, quite well. Like, they can do the first 70% of a project very quickly. Mm-hmm. But then, as most engineers know, and as a recovering software engineer myself, one of the things that's really, really tricky is you have to make deliberate trade-offs, and you have to live with those trade-offs, right? You're always going to be compromising between whether it's runtime or memory or different constraints that you have. And you're going to do this in countless different dimensions. They're very bad at taking those and making those deliberate decisions and then living with the consequences later down the line. They just generally aggregate what they think is the best solution, and we'll try and offer that to you. And a lot of times that's great. Like, if you're building an MVP, you don't really care about those things. But if you're trying to build a scalable service model for a product, you have to take into account all the edge cases. You have to be mindful. And like we mentioned with Rovo, like, you have to be deliberate. You have to have your strategy aligned so your product decisions will flow from that. And we've seen a lot of challenges there. Another thing that I think is important to keep in mind is that I think there's a risk to the correct continuous development of talent. That is something we need to take into account as well. So because it acts so well as that middle engineer, it'll accelerate the productivity for senior engineers, but it could potentially also keep junior engineers who need that hand-holding, who need to go through those hard things, through those periods of low productivity, because that's where the learning is. It could potentially keep them at bay. And if that happens collectively across the organization, which is a trend we see often in tough macroeconomic times, we're going to run into those problems down the line. We're going to run into a lack of senior engineers that are available to kind of service that. So I think organizations also need to be very mindful that while there's short-term benefits and productivity gains to add, if you are the size of Google or aspire to be that way, you also need to make sure that everybody is learning and benefiting across the way, which means feedback loops, which means sometimes you have to slow down and invest in your people, even if they're not being able to deliver as much product or value as you want, or heaven forbid you measure things by lines of code or commit, which you should never do. But like, I think that there's that downside, right? And I think that that's where the agents are potentially something that can give us a short-term benefit for long-term pain if we don't articulate some of those concerns and make sure that we're deliberate in how we work around that.
Thank you, Phil. So would you say that there are steps that teams can take basically to make them more agile in 2025 along the training approach?
Yeah, I think so. I think like I said, deliberateness, clarity, transparency of objectives, right? I think it's fine to tell a team of engineers our organizational goal is to increase profit, or our organizational goal is to grow revenue 30%. They then have that context to then make decisions themselves. And while oftentimes it's not a direct correlation between profit or revenue and what database schema you're going to pick or whatever else, you are going to run into trade-offs, and they can give you the correct answer within that. Or they can offer you kind of the correct trade-offs within the context that you want to make decisions on. So I think that that's really important. We've seen organizations that have that singular purpose and singular message and clear descriptions of it really succeed and thrive. It's when you get outside of that that you really struggle with making sure that you're both effective and efficient, right? There are two different elements of agility that I think are really important. And where most organizations struggle is being able to articulate that. And so you run into that feedback loop that can be very constructive, because then you can tell people, like, what do you mean by that? What in this context, what do you want? Mm-hmm. And so while your vision and your mission won't change, your strategy for this year will hopefully get battle tested and tweaked and become better. So I think that's kind of where a lot of that will fit in. And you need to have the mindset to take that feedback and to search for it, because I'm sure we've all seen this, the more you do something, the more senior you become in your career, the harder and the more deliberate you have to be about finding feedback. And of course, incorporating it into your work with the context that it was provided at. So those are challenges that I think are things that we can overcome, but you have to be very deliberate about it.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah. Perhaps this one's for Shar. How can businesses measure success of their Agile KPIs? Obviously, KPIs are really important when it comes to Agile and measuring success.
I think we're seeing a phase of where we need to move beyond traditional KPIs. I really look forward to where I have a conversation with a CIO or even a CFO who wants to talk about employee engagement, because that is actually really critical in a world where accessibility now to work for companies across the world, holding on to your employees is actually super, super important as a business prerogative. And so and agility really plays a really big core in that, because it keeps, feedback loops are more than just letting each other know what we've done for the day, what we plan on doing for the rest of the day. It's actually a way to integrate teams better and to assist with, upskilling and knowledge sharing. And there's a whole dynamic around it. So looking at non-traditional KPIs, so employee engagement for agility, because generally wouldn't see employee engagement tied to agility. Things like adaptability. How quickly was our teams able to pivot when a crisis hits or when something doesn't go according to plan? Are we still able to effectively capitalize on the work we've done, or is everything throwaway? How adaptable is the organization actually becoming? I think another thing is cross-functional collaboration. We say the words, we know that we want to work like that. So we want to get operations and development teams, and production support and everyone working better together, because it just means the customer gets a better service. But really being able to measure that. Are we actually effectively doing that? Are those processes tying up into everything that it's supposed to be? And then, last and not least, continuous improvement is a real thing. So it's more than just, this is what we're saying we're doing, and then we're going to try and do it next week. It should be a really tangible metric. Teams are getting together and measuring themselves effectively. There should be outputs in terms of what we want to improve on, and those should be implemented consciously and intentionally, and then measured as a metric if they're actually achieving those things. So I do think that if we move towards more non-traditional KPIs, we can measure our business more effectively in meaningful ways, in things that actually do generate business value back to the organization.
Thank you, Shar. So maybe Phil or Shar, either of you can take this one. Phil's taking this one, obviously. Does Agile, please do. Does Agile go beyond the organizational workplace? Does it affect people and communities, for example?
Ooh, I think so. I think so. You see a lot of organizations, like the government in particular, also wanting to be more agile. Some people will take that as trying to be more efficient with their resources and making sure that they're really kind of delivering on what's promised. But I think a lot of the principles around making sure that you deliver the right value and you process feedback and you want to make sure that the end user, the customer, in the broadest sense of the term, right, whoever is benefiting from what you're doing, and that can be the kids at a playground, right? If you build a playground, it can be volunteers that you referee a hockey game, like all that. The principles and the mindsets for agility around asking for feedback and taking it into your behavior and processing it and making sure that you're actually delivering on what people are expecting, I think those are fairly universal, right? I think that's how we as humans do things for other humans. While in most cases, a lot of that is in the business context, right? In the capitalist society that we live in, it's around dollars and cents. And to Shar's earlier point, right, a lot of that, while there are interim KPIs, internal ones, I think the biggest KPI for an agile transformation is still going to be revenue and profit. And I think most agile organizations shouldn't shy away from that. But there's no reason why you can't also include happiness, and heck, maybe you go even a step further, or human development index and all that stuff. I think at its core, agility is about how we do things for other people, and that is kind of universal.
Thank you very much. And as a final reminder for everybody watching, if you have any questions for our experts, now is your chance to ask those last few questions. If you've got anything burning, if you're hovering over the keyboard, put your question in, please. They are waiting to answer your questions. And now we've only got 9 minutes left. I can't believe it. 9 minutes. This has whizzed by. I cannot believe it. Phil, do you have any final thoughts, or Shar, any final thoughts on kind of what 2025 has in store for Agile?
I think the only thing I want to reiterate, I guess, is that as we kind of, your last question brought in, like Agile is about how you do everything. It's not about being more agile. I don't think that's a useful conversation or fruitful thought. And so when we talk to anyone in the organization, right, CEO, VP of engineering, but also just individual contributors, I think it helps to keep everything as clear and transparent as possible. If your organization needs to do more revenue, make that the goal, and don't have anything, whether it's your agile transformation, right, you're changing the way you work, or just individuals that are contributing and wanting to do the right thing and be good at their job within the context of the organization, don't shy away from that. So I think that's really important, right? The transparency and the clarity element are just key. And that can be as banal as dollars and cents. It can be much more idealistic, right? Let's put people on Mars. Like, I think all those things are correct, right? If that's the organizational goal, that's the organizational goal. And measuring it, sometimes it's easy, right? It's very easy to measure how many humans are on Mars so far. But it's also very easy to measure revenue. It's very easy to measure profit. And it's a lot harder to measure customer engagement, things like that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but as long as we make sure that the relative priority is clear to everybody, and we make sure that that's key, then I think we're solid. And then everything else is just about adaptability, right? It's trying things, learning, improving, take the things that work, leave the things that don't. If you don't like some parts of an agile framework, kick it out the door, right? No one will know. Maybe they will know. Who cares, right? As long as you got better. I think the intent is right, is to be that, right? Just to get better every little bit of the way. And that's the way we try and approach these things.
Thank you, Phil. I'm gonna pass to Shar for her final thoughts as well before we wrap up. Is there anything else you would like to add in terms of predictions, or what you see happening in 2025 in the world of Agile, or even business in general, that Agile may impact?
I don't know if it's a prediction, but it's definitely a hope. I really hope that, the hardest part when it comes to change of any kind, whether it's a significant organizational change, transformation, or just a simple personal change like losing weight, the part that we hate the most is that phase in between, where we know what we want to get to, but we haven't yet figured out how we're going to get there. And the only way to do that is by doing. So experimentation and exploration is a significant part of any transformation, personal or otherwise. And it's important that we, as leaderships and leaders and individuals really embrace that fact, because it is in doing that experimentation and exploration that we begin to understand a little bit more of the direction we're going in, because a lot of the time it sounds really good in theory, but when you get down into the nuts and bolts, it might not be the best thing for you. So, keep that open-mindedness, keep that transparency. I think Phil mentioned, keep that clarity. This is what we're going, where we want to go, but open the floor to experimentation and exploration. Because I know that's hard. Like, we don't want to waste money, and we don't want to, send people off on a tangent, and we want everyone to be together, Cohesiveness and alignment are two very different things. You could have cohesive people that are traveling in opposite directions, but because they have a common foundation, they're still cohesive. Alignment is when everybody is doing everything exactly the same. You can sometimes, sabotage the efforts that you're trying to get to, because of not fully understanding what it means to experiment a little bit in this space. So be brave, embrace the journey. A big part of it is that uncomfortable space of experimenting and exploring, and create that for your teams. Create that environment where experimentation and exploration is welcomed, celebrated, even recognized. Do these things, and we can promise you, as the Adaptivist team, we see it, we live it, and we know exactly how difficult it is. But we've also seen the other side of the rainbow. It's really getting to the heart of what transformation actually means.
Oh, Shar, thank you. I love that. That was lovely. So we've pretty much reached the end of our expert hour with Phil and Shar. We really hope you've enjoyed it. For anyone who joined us late or wants to read more, we've also captured these predictions in a 2-part blog series on our website, which is available now. So you can go and read that, or you can come and speak to us directly about your Agile transformation aspirations in 2025. Please contact us via our website, goes without saying, and look out for the next expert hour, which we're really excited to say is DevOps predictions for 2025. So if anyone's got any final questions, you've got like 3 minutes, go for it. Really hoping you get some more extra live questions in here. I'm going to just have a little pause, see if anyone wants to add anything else.
Yeah, please do. We love to talk, in case you haven't noticed.
That's why we're time boxed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it. While we're waiting, Karen, I just want to say, well done. If you didn't know, Karen was stepping into the unknown here with this, and I really loved every minute of it. So well done, Karen.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Very agile of you. Thank you very much.
Agreed. Stellar MC.
Oh, thank you very much. So there's no further questions? Any at all? Any takers?
Watch us get like an awfully difficult question right at the last minute.
I know. I'm just thinking it'll be something's coming for sure. No, I think that might be.
Phil, is it possible that we've answered every question anyone could ever have? That would be magnificent.
No.
For a moment, I was just like, that would be fantastic. But you know where we're at.
60 minutes.
Yeah, solved it. Can you imagine? That would be amazing. But I think everyone knows where we are, so that does help.
Definitely. Phil, is it an opportunity, as we've got a couple of minutes left, to talk a bit more about Adaptivist and the Agile services we offer beyond what we already... Oh, actually, someone's come in at the 11th hour. Oh no, it's Sammy's just saying, great session. Thanks for putting it together. That is really nice. Thank you, Sammy.
Sammy just didn't want the sales pitch. That's fine. We can happily chat with anybody around their Agile transformational challenges. Like I said, we stick with pragmatic Agile, focused on business outcomes. So we don't do a lot of, we'll help you be more Agile. Again, don't even know what that means. But we definitely can help with the agility in terms of delivering a lot of the benefits that being Agile and adopting those processes can give, both the secondary benefits and the primary ones like revenue, and the secondary ones around customer engagement, innovation, developer experience, and happiness, all that stuff. I think that's worth talking about. And we try and make sure that we do that in whatever definition of success the customers want. So that might be a good one to end on.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you both very much for answering all of my questions. There was a lot. It was intense. So thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Unless anyone's got any last questions, we're probably going to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Karen. Thank you, Shar.
Have a good one.
There goes the bell.
Thanks all.